Welcome to Matters of DeCorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. Different camera angle. I'm actually using a tripod off to the side of my setup right now. Uh, Not sure what I think about it. I'll let you know in a few videos. This month got away from me. The school schedule and other things have been taking up my time. So once again, here's a mad rush to have material out by the end of the month. Should be going back to a weekly schedule back in December. Well, next week. Uh, Holidays, craziness, stuff. That and my semester ends on the 15th of December, so things should be a little bit easier. So, I am a fan of Agatha Christie. More to the point, my mother is a fan of Agatha Christie, and she shared that fandom with me. I haven't read a lot of the books, a few of them, but one of them that I absolutely read was Murder on the Orient Express. Uh, Read the book. I've seen every film adaptation. So when the latest one came out by Kenneth Branagh, that guy, um, I had to take my mom. We went opening night, sat in a very nice theater, thoroughly enjoyed it. Brief review. Uh, Spoilers for a story that came out in 1934, but they didn't change too much. They added a little Biff Bam Pow action, which I thought was kind of nice. Made it suitable for a modern audience, while at the same time being one of those kinds of movies they just don't make anymore. Wonderful ensemble piece, limited set, really good acting. Kinda surprising. I recommend it. It made me start to think about the challenges of running a mystery, particularly a murder mystery, in a role-playing setting. Two approaches. There are two approaches, and or at least as I have done it, and you don't necessarily need to stick with one or the other. You can jump back and forth between the two, which may be preferable. I'm going to frame this in the format of a role-playing game that I ran for a few conventions, my Murder LARP. Um, Fairly simple format for most of it. People showed up. They had a sheet that described a little bit about their character and their background. Um, they got to know each other. They drank some punch. And then the lights went out, came back up, and someone was dead. And then my friend Eric usually took the part of the body and did a really good job with it. Uh, at which point, everything froze, and I handed everyone their second character sheet. Now, this had information that was secret to that character. One of them was, you're the murderer, and you win this thing if no one figures it out. The rest of them all had secrets, things that they needed to hide. Uh, they were people from industry that had been cheating the taxpayer. They had mysterious connections to cults. I threw a little Lovecraft in and a little Sinclair Lewis, and um, so that now as people started to interview each other and talk about the murder and look for stuff, they had things that they were not necessarily letting out. Then I provided clues. In one way, shape, or form, I had little pieces of paper that had clues, things that might come out about someone, a little something about the murder site or about how the murder was done. Some of it made absolutely no sense. Some of it didn't mean anything. You're looking at a crime scene, sometimes you find things that don't actually pertain to the crime scene. So people had to sort out what the clues meant. They had to work out who was lying to them about what. And the murderer had to play along with everything and try to misdirect people. In this situation, we knew who the murderer was. And the murderer had to role play being a murderer, trying to conceal themselves. It helped that everyone had something to conceal, so you couldn't trust anyone. If you are doing a convention game or a tournament of some sort, and you have control over the character sheets that those people get in front of them. You can write the characters and you can create those interconnections before anyone ever sits down at the table. You have a bonus in this kind of situation because you can write a mystery. You can write a mystery and plot out the characters and plot the interrelations, and having that level of control, yeah, you can pretty much craft an enjoyable mystery experience. And if the murderer gets away, the murderer gets away, and that's a triumph for someone at the table, the murderer, and you all have a story. If, however, you are going to use a more traditional role-playing, that you're sitting down with your group and you say, hey, I'd like to run a situation where there's a mystery, maybe even a murder mystery. Well, in most role-playing groups, the fact that someone has killed someone else, it's kind of a weekly event. It's like, woohoo, experience. But you tone that down and someone dies who wasn't supposed to die, and you track down who's responsible for that. Maybe it was a player character, maybe it wasn't, but you no longer have that control over what those interdependencies are, what those connections are. You know what everyone sitting at the table has for a character. You may know their background. You may be able to slip things into their background that make them more or less likely to have been involved. Then you have clues. And this is where you have to remember that the game master is representative of all of the senses of the characters and the arbiter of what knowledge they do and don't have. You can write a brilliant mystery and still have to spoon feed your clues to the player characters. This is not saying anything against the players. They just don't necessarily have all the knowledge and information that their characters do. You have a character that's got a chemistry skill on their sheet, which is great. The character will know what H2SO4 is. The player may not understand that sulfuric acid. So you can say H2SO4 till you're blue in the face, but the player will just nod at you as though they understand until you give them a roll in the chemistry skill and explain it to them. That might have been subtle, that might have been brilliant, might have been trying to telegraph that some way, but you still have to rely on the skills on the character sheets as opposed to the skills in the actual players' heads. Just because you crafted the most brilliant murder mystery ever, and you might have, I don't know, there's a lot of that going on, does not mean that your players are going to necessarily pick up on all of these subtle and wondrous clues that you have created. So you can, in that way, determine who the murderer is. Straight up, you know what the crime is, you know what the murder is. You can throw the clues out there for people to roll on and discover and hope that they piece it together. Again, here's where that breaks down, because deductive reasoning is also a skill which can appear on a character sheet and which a lot of players may not have to the degree that their player characters are. I can play Sherlock Holmes as a character. I am not Sherlock Holmes. Okay, I've studied Holmesian deduction, but expecting me to come up with information based on what's been laid on the table, as opposed to my character coming up with it, is an entirely different matter. Solving the mystery, while it shouldn't come down to a dice roll, might. It's all in how you design it. And that's if everyone plays along and you don't have someone pulling a Batman and just wandering around to all the suspects and beating them until someone confesses, whether they did it or not. That's unfortunately a possibility in a lot of the games I've been in. Either that or finding out who the murderer is and asking for a little hush money so that you don't expose them. I've played some terrible people. Be that as it may. There's another approach to the murder mystery. It's weird. When I was running this murder LARP, There were winners. We voted on who the top 3 players were in the first 3 rounds. And those 9 people got together for the final. There was a murder. There were clues. I didn't know who the killer was. I wrote it. I didn't know who the killer was. The clues kind of pointed all over the place. The people were playing more or less the characters that they had played before, even if they were the killer. And at the end of once all the clues had been distributed and everyone had had a chance to interview everyone, and they got to a point where, well, it was about 2 hours. The event went a little bit longer than that, but at the end of that time, me and a panel of 2 judges sat outside the room, and we brought people out one at a time and had them tell us what the solution to the murder was. Again, I didn't know. There had been a murder. Someone there had done it. And we did not have any clue. Well, we had clues, but they weren't good ones. They weren't really indicative. We had to rely on the person who told the best version of the murder. That was how we determined it. The person who sold us on their interpretation of the clues and the circumstances. It's open-ended. You have to trust those people. Those people had all gone through a round of the murder LARP. They had all performed really, really well at finding clues and interpreting clues and asking the right questions and dealing with the answers. And that was, so we knew those people would come up with something. The solution at the end was actually kind of elegant. I wish I'd thought of it. In a traditional role-playing setting, paper and dice sitting around a table. I have often used the trick of throwing out a situation and not explaining it very well, but coming up with stuff off the top of my head when people ask for questions, and people will ask for details you haven't planned on, and they'll ask for, what's that thing over there? What's this lake about? The lake might just be a map feature that you were hoping people would go past, but they might, want to go explore it. What's in the lake? What's under the lake? What kind of weeds are in the lake? How deep are the weeds in the lake? And you feed them information off the top of your head if you can. Go to Wikipedia or what have you, and give them some stuff. Give them answers. Make every answer you give them seem like something you had thought of before. Is there an island in the middle of the lake? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Yeah, there's a little island. It's only about 40 feet across, very sparse vegetation, kind of rocky. But yeah, there's an island. You could row to it. There might be a rowboat around here. You don't see one right now. Elaborate. Let your imagination run just a little wild. Don't tell them who did it. Someone will eventually bring a solution to your feet. Which is awesome, especially if you never had a solution to begin with. If you did not know. Player characters are kind of brilliant at sitting around and coming up with information that never existed before. Taking the stuff that you gave them as though you had something in mind and trying to figure out what you had planned out. Just make sure that they never figure out that's what you're doing. You have to practice selling information. You have to practice making everything sound very deliberate. That could be it, but what about the guy in black over in the corner? Oh, you have an answer for that too? Wow, you figured it out. Actually, I was really hoping you guys would get that. Wow, you solved it. Ideally, you're combining these techniques. You have a murder mystery in mind, yet you have a murder, you have a crime, you have a solution. Here, don't get married to it, because you wrote a mystery. Excellent, that's great. Unless you've studied mystery writing or you're really a devotee of the genre, you might have missed a thing or two. And that's okay, because they're going to fill it in. And maybe someone comes up with a better solution than yours. Run with that, because that does two amazing things. One, it makes them think they are geniuses because they went through this convoluted mystery plot and they worked it out. And you give them experience for that and all kinds of props, and they get awards from the mayor. And yeah, well done, you solved this mystery. Two, it makes you look like a genius, that you were able to write this complex, really convoluted scenario that everyone had to hunt through and lead them through to this correct solution. They got their satisfaction. You look like a genius. Win-win all the way around. You can go and buy a host your own murder mystery, and those are pretty effective. Those have well-balanced characters and scenarios and clues, and adapting those to a tabletop situation is surprisingly easy. Or, you do the host your own murder mystery party, but just this once, you show up in character. And no combat unless you want to work out something with, buffers and pads, but why? You can wander around and drink punches and beers, have a little snack, and solve a mystery in character. And that might be a nice change of pace. I love mysteries. I really do. Studied Arthur Conan Doyle in junior high and high school. Studying Scarlet was one of my first real non-science fiction books that I dug into. And again, my mom had shelves full of the masters, Agatha Christie, Neil Marsh. And my dad's science fiction collection was pretty big, but that was half the books in the house. The other half of the books were my mom's mysteries and romances, but mostly mysteries. And sometimes those collections crossed over. Isaac Asimov and Larry Niven, and authors who took mysteries into science fiction genres. That's another thing. You want to run a murder mystery in D&D, you've got some problems. Mostly that you can break the rules of mysteries in Dungeons and Dragons, or in any game where you can throw magic or have super high technology. A locked room mystery stops being a locked room mystery when you have people with teleportation spells or there's a transporter on the starship upstairs. You have to adapt and adjust for that. Either reasons why this thing wouldn't work or some kind of proof that that's not what was done. Or maybe it was. Maybe this murder was committed entirely with magic. Maybe there's some super high-tech solution to this, and maybe that's how things get tracked down and dealt with. It's not a bad thing to throw extra elements into it. Just remember, keep your rules consistent, and keep it fair. No spell that no one has ever heard before coming out the end. Oh no, this is how I did it, and all of you missed it because only I know the spell. No. Randall Garrett wrote a series of books about Lord Darcy, a detective in a world where magic worked better than technology. And he had very consistent rules for his magic. Lord Darcy, the detective, had mages who traveled around with him to test for magic. It's like, nope, law of similarity says that no magic was used in this room, so I don't know how it was done. I guess you're going to have to solve it. And that really worked. If you ever get a chance to read any Randall Garrett stories, absolutely, highly recommended. And a really good, I really ought to codify the laws of magic in those books as far as games go, so that exactly that kind of thing can happen. Kinda masterful. Well, thank you for following me on this particular flight of fancy through murder and mystery. If you liked the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give me a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. If you have your own experiences with Murder on the Orient Express, or murder mysteries, or Agatha Christie, or even just have a random comment or question, or if there's something you'd like me to talk about, leave me a comment. You'll love leaving me a comment. I love getting a comment. Like to see these videos as soon as they come out, hit the suggestion button or hit the subscribe button. If you do hit the subscribe button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, why not? There's a little notification bell next to the subscribe button, so you actually get tagged when the videos come out. Be a good thing to hit that. If you super dug the video and would like to support me in some way, hit me up at my Patreon page, www.patreon.com, and consider donating. Absolutely anything helps, and it allows me to make better videos more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I'm Scott Corum. This is What Has Mattered to Me, and I'll see you next time with the next Matters of DeCorum.